These days I'm on vacation in Italy with my family, and so I'm taking this trip as an opportunity to also discover some games by local designers and published by Italian publishers. And Ophiuchus is one such game that I found in a local game store. Although I have to say, to find, let's call them designer games, author games, is a little harder in Italy than in the US. Many game stores are still mainly toy stores with some copies of Monopoly and Risk and Clue and other mass market games on one or two shelves, and large chains of retail stores. So where now in the US you can also find sets of Catan and other more complex games. Here they still only carry mass market games. But I was able again to find some of these games in a specialized store, and one such game was Ophiuchus. Ophiuchus is an abstract game, and it is a domino variant, as you can see just from the components. And I was fine with that, because when I'm traveling and I'm on vacation, then my opponents are going to be, well, myself, if it's a solitaire game, or my family. That means my wife, who is a non-specialized gamer. She's a casual gamer, doesn't like games that are very complex, and also my daughters that are 6 and 8. And so I'm gonna play with them games only of a certain degree of complexity. The fact that this seemed very simple, and it is, I could tell my wife, look, it's kind of like domino with 1 or 2 extra rules. It's not going to be painful to learn. Those were pluses. I was also attracted by the material beauty of the components. The components are beautiful, absolutely. Nothing to complain about that. But gameplay is equally beautiful. Oh, well, that we'll talk about that later. That may be a little bit of a problem. The rules are very simple. Let me revise that. The rules are very short, and I'm sure that they are simple if you can understand them well. The rules, at least in my copy, only come in English. They clearly have been written by non-native speakers of English, or maybe by a native speaker that really enjoys phrasing things awkwardly. For a game with rules so simple, I shouldn't have had as many doubts as I had, I believe. There are certain sentences that still can't entirely make sense of, and I just have to make judgment calls if the rules are not exactly as designed. The way I explain them in this video, well, so be it. I'm explaining the game at the best of my understanding. I think they need to brush up the rules and release a new version, possibly online, or it would have been great to have Italian and English, so at least I could check for sure what they meant. Now, in the game, it's a domino variant, so you have these tiles, amazingly, again, attractive tile, thick, sturdy, beautiful, shiny, glossy, and you can see, depending on the angle of the light, there are these silver things, silver lines that kind of stand out from the background. Then you have these attractive patterns of circles, just very attractive components. So these are the main tiles that in domino fashion you will place in a pattern on the table. Again, according to different rules from traditional domino though. And then you have these are the large tiles, scoring tiles. Basically, you will be using these tiles here to make patterns on the board to create certain combinations that will allow you to acquire these tiles. This area here, the top left, indicates the pattern that you need to produce to acquire that tile, and the number in the top right corner tells you the number of victory points. So simply, if I'm able to produce a line, a row, or a column with these 3 dots in it, I can take this tile, which is worth 3 points. By the way, as you can see, pretty oversized for what this needs to be. Mechanically speaking, this would be fine. It could even just be this big. But hey, pretty attractive, no? So this kind of pattern simply means dots of that type in a row, and means 3 of them. This other pattern here means 4 dots, 4 symbols that are all different from one another. This one means 4 that are all the same. This one means 4 that are all the same, and they are in a sort of like square configuration, so in 4 different squares that are placed like that. And then we have 6 different from one another 5 that are all the same, and 6 that are all the same, which is the most difficult to pull off, and in fact it is worth a lot of points. So those tiles are available to anybody visible, and players will collect them. We'll try to collect them during the game. You also have some scoring tokens here, but we'll talk about those in a minute. As for gameplay, it's super simple. You have a hand of tiles during your game, during your turn. You look at those tiles and you add the one to the board. Usual things, don't add them weirdly like that. You simply add them orthogonally attached to other things. Pretty much I would say, if you play domino, attach them in a way that makes sense and doesn't look stupid, and that pretty much explains all the placement rules. There are, however, a couple of extra rules different from traditional domino. One is you have to stay in a virtual grid of 9 by 9. So right now we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So 8, 9 would be still fine, but then we couldn't add anything like that. So that is an important restriction. You cannot form empty areas. So for example, this would not be okay because it leaves that empty area there. And most importantly, when you add a new tile, the row and or columns that you form must not have more than 13 symbols. So here we have 1, 2, 3, 4, and 3, 7, 8, 9, and we already, and this is 6. So actually this placement would be illegal. This would work instead because we have 3 and 2, 5, and the 6, so that's 11. So no more than 13. If by placing a tile actually you form a line or a column of exactly 13, as I believe this should be the case, you get one of these tokens, which is worth a victory point at the end of the game. Or you get another advantage, which, if I understand correctly, again, this is the most awkwardly phrased part of the rules, you get 2 tiles and then you get to choose one to add to your hand. Since we are unclear the way we play, you get 13, you get a victory point, which is pretty good. Don't underestimate that. So you're trying basically to follow those placement rules, which are very hard later on in the game, as not many spaces are available. So the risk of simply not being able to place a tile are very real. So you're following those placement rules at the best of your possibilities, and you're trying to get those tiles there, those big scoring tiles. Early on it's pretty easy. These tiles players will get very easily. So early on it's pretty much you get a new scoring tile each turn or almost every turn, and then the game comes to a screeching halt where pretty much only the big ones, the 9 point and the 13 point are left, and the game simply turns into, let's see if I can get my opponent in a position where the opponent cannot place a new tile. It turns into a war of position rather than a race to the next scoring tile. The game is over when all of those tiles are assigned or all of these play tiles have been drawn. The rules seem to say, but does that mean when this stack is empty and players still have tiles in their hand, or when everything has been played? We play until there are no tiles left in play that can be placed. So whichever occurs first, or at the time, or the game may also end because it's impossible to add new tiles, and at that point the game is over. You score points coming from the scoring tiles, coming from these tokens. Also, you lose 2 points for each tile that you still have in your hand, and at that point the player with the highest total is the king or queen of the sky, of the night sky, of Ophiuchus, or in any case is the winner of the game. This is the general idea. The game looks beautiful. I played it with my wife. I'm not gonna play it with my daughters, and because of what I'm gonna tell you next. We didn't enjoy it all that much. It's a game that is really, really prone to analysis paralysis, alas. Very often in my videos, when it's about analysis paralysis, you will hear me blame the players rather than the game. I will say stuff like, yes, this game may give analysis paralysis, so make sure you play with the right people. It's just about you selecting the right people to play with. It's about the players. I'll make an exception here. It's really hard not to get into analysis paralysis in this game. If nothing else, because it's not intuitive, just at a glance, if this is a legal row or not. Is it? I don't know. I have to count. And actually, I do 3, 2, 3, 2, 6. And for other players, it may not be all that easy. Other players will count every time, and then they'll count, but how many? Okay. And so they're counting, okay, this is one too many, this is way too many, this is like, how many am I breaking the rule? And of course, getting exactly 13 is a big thing because you get good stuff. And so you're really considering, okay, I have these 3 tiles in my hand. This will give me that bonus, but it's legal this way. Is it illegal? This will give me So you're considering your options, and that's fine. But to consider your option are counting and recounting, not just this one, but every column, every row, constantly. You don't have to do, I wouldn't even say it's analysis paralysis exactly. It is more like recognition paralysis, the scanning paralysis. You have to scan, it takes so long and so much work to scan the board and see all the possibilities and counting and recounting these little dots, that it really kills the joy, it takes the joy out of the game. And that is really the biggest negative that I have, but it's a pretty big one, which is the game is slowed down constantly by the need of counting all of these dots. And it's just, that's the core rule of the game. I don't know how you can have the game, how you can just tweak it a little bit. You can't have the game in any other way, unless you completely ignore the maximum limit idea, simply place a tile, show that you have the pattern, and you get one of those scoring tiles. Maybe that will improve. But unless you're playing semi-randomly, I'll get a sense that this should work. And maybe you're not breaking any rule, or maybe you are. Right now I have no idea if that is legal or not. I had to count 5 to 7, 11. No, it's not legal by 1 or 2. 11 plus 4 is 13. Okay, I'll do this, but now I don't know if it's legal because of the grid. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. No, that's not legal. Actually, that means that this is not legal either. Is it? See, I already forgot. And that's the problem. It is a game that relies on, I would say, an interesting idea, an innovative way of seeing domino, and in fact is more of a tableau making, of a puzzle game than a domino game per se, although the components are reminiscent of that other game. But as a tableau game, as a puzzle type game, it's just one that does not work very much because the core mechanic is not intuitive at all to implement, because effective gameplay relies on constant analysis of a lot of factors. And for what it is, after I did all the analysis, I put down a tile, and very often I just put it somewhere that maybe is not that great, simply because I'm tired of doing all of the analysis, and so I just place it wherever, and be it as it may. Well, that is disappointing for a game that has pretty much one rule: place a tile and draw another one, which can be a great advantage for games you play with non-casual gamers. For a game that is so simple, having to go through all those mental steps to make sure that your placement is legal and possibly not too stupid, well, that is just too much. There's a disproportion between the simplicity of the core rules and what you have to do to implement those rules. And so playing the games, after a while, felt like homework. My wife and I really were not enjoying it all that much, and I'm not going to subject my daughters to playing this game. My daughter Amelia especially, she will want to make extra sure that she's making legal moves. She really doesn't like to make mistakes in games. There's a game that will cause her so much stress, much more stress than any enjoyment she might derive from it. So in general, Ophiuchus, maybe you have one of those computer-like minds. Boom, 19, boom, 12. You just look at it and it's synthetically, magically, you know exactly the value of all of all rows and columns, and you can then think and spend your mental energy on the strategy, which is really more tactics, because you react to what you have and what happens here. There isn't any long-term strategy. So maybe you're in that kind of mind, and you have friends that also have that same mind, then the game may work with you. Also, I play with 2 players only, and he was already too slow. Playing with 3 or 4 players, I can't imagine doing that. So Ophiuchus, it looks great, it looks spectacular, but as a design, it is one that we really did not enjoy, and one that therefore I cannot recommend.